Welcome to another episode of Purchase to Profits. I'm Seth Ferguson. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you don't miss our daily interviews with successful real estate investors. Our guest today started in residential sales in 1996 before transitioning to investing. His company serves almost 400 investors and has been involved in $500 million of real estate assets. John Bogdasarian is the president and CEO of Promanis. John, welcome to Purchase to Profits. It's great to have you on the show.
I appreciate it, Seth. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, really looking forward to this. So let's kick things off and talk about your real estate goals right now. What are you hoping to do in real estate?
Well, so right now we actually have 9 ground-up development deals in progress, and my goal is to sell those out and have those properties hit the projections we originally set for them. We have, I think, 3 in Colorado, 2 in Nashville. We have a Florida one. We just started a new one in Washington, D.C. we're very excited about, and we have a couple here in Ann Arbor. And so mostly what we do now is fund ground-up development deals throughout the country, and our primary focus is just trying to get those things through. There's always challenges with development.
Yeah. And so right now, would you say this is a pretty full plate for you, or do you think you have room to take on other projects as your company grows?
This is a pretty full plate for us. I think this is about as much as we want to have going on at any given time. We have an existing portfolio that we own, operate, and manage as well. And so the team seems to be about where we need to be in terms of activity and not having people go crazy. The problem being at times it doesn't feel like we're doing anything, but then when an issue comes in and we're hit with something unexpected, of course, it's insane. So, what we're trying to do right now is, like I said, as one property liquidates and gets completely off our plate, or we know it's kind of in its box and it's all done, then we can start another one. So we anticipate being able to roll out a new investment opportunity and write a proposal to a developer for the equity about every 60 to 90 days going forward. And that's sort of how properties will spin out as well and get off our plate.
Nice, because I know lots of people starting their business off, 1 or 2 projects seems like a lot. So how did you scale your company to where it is now, and did you hit any plateaus along the way?
Well, yeah, that's a great question, and it's a series of chicken and egg problems. So when I started out, I didn't really have any money, and I couldn't hire people, and didn't have a staff. So actually going all the way back to my 20s when I started as a residential real estate agent, my mom acted as my personal assistant for about 6 months while I got enough closings in the pipeline so that I could actually afford to pay an assistant to handle the paperwork. A lot of people realize that a sales guy, should be focused on being out in the field and taking listings and writing contracts. And I'm more of a deal guy. So I'm not really a very good admin guy, administration, or even day-to-day operations for that matter. So it took a long time, and there were a lot of chicken and egg problems, and almost all of those were solved the same way. It was where I got somebody to come on board for a very small base pay and agreed to participate in the upside of the company. So now my director of operations, who's one of my very best friends, he's a partner. My CFO, who also is one of my other very best friends, is a partner. And so over time, we all take very, very low base salaries, just enough to kind of pay the bills, if you will. And then, there's equity in all the projects and so forth, so that when they go well, we do well. If they don't go well, we don't make anything, but ideally the investors still do well, because that's our core business, is making sure the investors do well, because if they're not there, we don't have any money to run. So that's kind of how I built it. It took 20 years. So I'm almost an overnight success. I had a mentor that said, give yourself 20 years, you'll be an overnight success. So that's coincidentally about what it took.
Yeah, pretty much. And I'm glad you brought up the team aspect, because a lot of people, when they first start off, they're hesitant to bring on that extra help to help grow the business. But I've just found, even with myself, once you start bringing on the people, the growth is just exponential. So what sort of advice would you give to somebody who's maybe still doing everything on their own, but they want to scale their business?
Yeah. So first I started by building a team kind of outside my core office. It was just myself and a personal assistant. And I got my accounting firm to handle all my books and accounting on a just sort of like a fee for services basis for a long time, until I could afford my own, in-house CFO. And now, of course, we have an accounting team. So I guess the advice I would give is to, be creative, find ways to get it done in this day, and have, if you have a lot of confidence in yourself, make the leap. I never really advocate borrowing money to start a business. I'm more of a 0 to 1 guy, like a bootstrapper. The people that, and that's a problem too, right? I mean, that's a hindrance in growth, is I've got to make sure I've got everything in place, because I don't want to bring somebody in and then not afford to pay them, and that kind of thing. But I would say, if you've got faith in yourself, you can kind of take a leap and really, when you get one good transaction going or one development deal that comes to fruition, instead of taking, 500 grand or 300 grand or whatever you made off of it and paying it to yourself, leave that in the company, which is what I would do. And then that would give me the confidence to hire the next person and so forth. I did at one point in time operate with a business line of credit. And that was very, very stressful, because you'd get that business line of credit almost all the way extended out, and then you'd have a closing and you'd pay it back, and then you'd extend it out again. And in retrospect, in hindsight, I think I would have done that a little differently and just been patient and let one deal come to fruition and get a little bit ahead of it. Because you never want to be, as you know, in this position. In my world, one thing I caution against with everybody who comes and talks to me about, hey, how do you syndicate? How do you do this? Don't put yourself in a position where you have to do the next deal. You really, really don't want to negotiate from that position. It's just a terrible place to be in. And you have to, it's like if you have one tenant in your only building and they threaten to leave, you're in a real world of hurt. Whereas if you have, 20 tenants in there and none of them are greater than, 5 or 10% of it, you're in a much better position.
Yeah. And it's like a wolf. They can smell that desperation on you too.
Well, it's true, but the reality is it's all coming from in your own head. And I don't know many people who can really, really bluff that well, and have that kind of detachment from the outcome, especially if you have a family to support and you're dealing with other people's money. That's a real pressure in and of itself, is working with other people's money.
Yeah, for sure. So have you developed any routines or rituals that have helped keep you focused and made you successful?
Routines and rituals. I'll tell you what, I try not to have important conversations on a Tuesday. For some reason, Tuesdays are not days I'm great in the office. So I try and do more working on the business, looking at my business plan. I keep a 5-year life plan. So I spend time on Tuesdays sort of reviewing things, doing things like that. Thursdays are great days for me. Thursday is my favorite day. I don't know why. It's just everything's great on a Thursday. So I try to have more important conversations and meetings on Thursdays. I will, and then before we buy a property or decide on a development deal, I like to go look at it on a Monday, preferably when it's gray and rainy. And if we still like it then it's okay. If I like something and write a proposal on a Thursday, that's fine. But we're going to do our due diligence and review all the information on a Monday or a Tuesday and make sure we're still interested. So, I mean, that's kind of schedule-wise. I just sort of have this flow as to how I work. And so I try and, make sure I'm aware of that. The other thing I'm not very good at is I'm not very good at day-to-day operations. I'm more of like I said, a deal guy. I guess I'm classic ADD, where I can hyper focus on something, but then, hey, look, there goes a squirrel. Whoa, did you see that? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so I have to be really on, or if I'm not make important decisions. And everyone in my office is much more stable in terms of, showing up, consistency, being there. And so, and then there are there are different personalities in the office as well, of course. So another key is to try and have the right people having the right conversations with people, and keep myself to, really wiring the deals together and having maybe some critical conversations. And I'm a great problem solver. So when we're hit with crazy things like we were this spring, just crazy things we've never even heard of before, nobody's heard of before, I'm very good at stepping in and making those into a little bit of an opportunity and solving them. That's where my strengths are.
Yeah. And how long did it take you to realize that you were that type of person, and that you needed staff of another personality type?
I'm still trying to figure it out. I would say the key point was where I guess I sort of I was structuring everything that way throughout my whole life. I've sort of been, I thought, oh man, you're just lazy. You need to surround yourself with people who are really competent. I was always told I was lazy. I didn't apply myself. I wouldn't amount to much, and throughout all my school years. So, that's in the back of my head. And so I've always kind of tried to structure my business. I feel a little like a hypocrite, because I'm like, well, you're going to be in the office every day, and I'm going to show up every once in a while and, wire a whole bunch of stuff together, and then you're going to deal with it. But it's funny, everyone knows this about you before you know it about yourself. Yeah. So everyone on my team knew this about me before I did. It came to me maybe 6 years ago. I think 5-6 years ago. I was at an event, and I ran into one of my investors who's a heart surgeon, and I was introduced to his wife, who's a psychiatrist, and we got talking, and she was asking me a few questions, and they're invested with me. And she started asking me, like, well, did you get like kind of C's in school? And I said, well, yeah, she said, well, you probably didn't, got accused of not applying. She had me diagnosed in like 5 minutes, and she didn't even say anything. She just gave me a couple books to read. And so I picked up those books. One was called Delivered from Distraction. And then there was another one, can't think of the name offhand, but they were great books, and they're all about sort of this ADD mindset. And it's not, it's bad. It's labeled as a disorder, because really it's just your brain works a little bit differently. And if you understand it, it could be very good and powerful. But if you don't, and you get criticized for it, especially if you start believing that input that other people are putting into your brain, they're trying to fit you into a different, into the norm, right? And so if you buy into that, I mean, fortunately, I don't listen to people who say those things too much, but it's still kind of in there. And if you buy into it, you can really get in a bad place, right? Because now you have low self-esteem, you're beating yourself up. So it could be a downward spiral. But I'd say, mostly people know more about me than I know about myself. I'm always trying to figure it out. But the light did come on when I read that book maybe 6 years ago. So.
Yeah. And I like that the psychiatrist had you figured out, and she still invested money with you. So that means you're good. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like I said, it's not a bad thing. It's just a thing. And and a lot of people, have a lot of people that want to work for me, want to learn the business, want to do whatever. And maybe they want to go start their own thing. Great. I'm all for 100% transparency, sharing information, helping people get to where they need to be. But I do caution people, because I think certain times people really want to be the head of an organization. They want to be the guy in charge, or they want to be the this or the that. And maybe that's not the role that they're best suited to. I don't even, consider myself to be the best, runner of the whole company. I mean, I really look at it like my CEO, Brad McFarland, really, I mean, he's really the head of the organization. I've now put myself in a position of being the guy who goes out and finds deals and that kind of thing. So, you got to be careful about that, I think, in many ways.
Yeah, no, those were some really good tips. So let's talk about a deal. A keystone deal that made a big impact on you and your business. Is there one that comes to mind?
Yeah. I mean, there's. I'll give you a couple. I'll give you one pivotal point. I had sold out of a student housing portfolio that I bought in South Bend that housed about 480 Notre Dame students. Bought it in 2005. I was going to refinance it in 2007 because I was a personal guarantor on like $8 million of debt, and I was a little nervous about it. And then the broker who was going to try and arrange the financing for me said, "Hey, would you consider selling this?" And I hadn't really considered that. So he said, "Well, I can get you, 14 million for it or something." I mean, so these guys, so I'm like, maybe we should do that. And so we put it on the market and we sold it in 2007. And it was really fortunate because, of course, what happened in 2007. And so we doubled everybody's money in that deal. And I got, a lot of upside and was able to pay off a lot of home equity lines and various things that I was using to build my business, and put myself in a really good position to take advantage of what I knew was kind of coming. I just didn't know it was going to be as bad as it was, but I did know that we were coming into, some troubled times in terms of real estate. So I turned around. So that's the deal that was very pivotal. It's, allowed me to survive the whole nightmare of 7, 8, and 9. But I did turn around and buy an apartment complex in 2007 that I overpaid for. And that one was really what set me up in business to do well on every subsequent deal, because I didn't really understand the level of due diligence one should put into a purchase before making it, the whole financing and how quickly that can melt down. I mean, my yield spread widened by 1.5 points in the last week before closing. So I went from basically about a 4.7 interest rate up to 6.13 at closing. And I was stuck in that for 10 years. And, it was a conduit CMBS loan. And that's another thing I learned. I hate CMBS loans. I don't like that. And it's terrible. But, so, and I tried to bail out of that transaction actually right before closing because of all that stuff. But we closed on it. Instead of cash flowing from day one, it took us 2 years to fix all the challenges in that property. It still worked out great. The investors still got their cash flow. We were actually able to do well on the back end sale, and everybody made money on it. But I will say it was probably the most difficult 2 years of my life, at least a year and a half, where I thought, oh my gosh, we're going to lose all this money, and I just made all this money for these people, and now we're going to give it all back. And but it we dug in. And so that lesson of that deal being as stressful as it was still goes through my mind before we close on or commit to a property. And that's what really set me up, because I didn't buy anything after that until 2009. And that's when we put our big fund together and started buying property after property after property. And we were buying at 12 cap rates. I mean, we were really, and we were just, even some of those turned out to be just, barely base hits, but we put them all together in a fund. I created this whole structure where we owned, 3 or 4 million square feet all under one entity, so that my 300 or 400 investors, it grew to that. It started with 11 in the first deal. But as we grew, we really built a private, non-traded REIT type structure. We used LLCs, but it worked the same way, and it gave me a tremendous amount of flexibility. It gave me a tremendous amount of power when negotiating with lenders and tenants and everybody else. And it came out of that one transaction that caused me to think so hard about what I wanted to do going forward.
Yeah. And I find it so fascinating because, you were going through, let's say, a year and a half to 2 years of absolute hell with this deal. How did you keep yourself focused forward? Because I'm sure there were some pretty rocky times, emotionally and mentally. How did you pull yourself out of it to get through?
Well, it was a pretty regular conversation with my wife about, it's going to be okay. We can sell everything. If we live in a trailer park, that'll be all right. That kind of stuff. And, we can always rent an apartment. I only had one daughter at the time. My second was born in 2008. And she kept convincing me we'd be okay in a 2-bedroom apartment and we could always rebuild. Of course, that never happened, but that's where my brain would go. And she swore she'd stick with me. And fortunately, it never ended up there. But it was a lot of stressful conversations, being talked off the ledge many times. And, I hate to even go back and visit that level of anxiety that I get about, it's worse. Like, I've lost my own money, and by investing in other people's things, and um, even on some decisions I made myself that, probably were made a little too easily.
Hmm.
But when you have other people's money, it just puts a whole other level of sort of stress over it. And I think it has to do with a lot of it. I think for me mentally had to do with this whole idea of I still had this, I don't know if it's a chip on my shoulder, but I still had this thing, and this, you'll never amount to anything. You didn't, do well in school. You don't have the pedigree, that kind of thing. And Ann Arbor is a small town, and I have, at this, a lot of people invested with me, and most of them are from here. It's now they're all over the place, but like back then it was all, around town. And so I think what really bothered me more was not really so much the money. It was the, you're a loser if you lose, or whatever, and blah, blah, blah. And, today I think I'd be much more realistic about what that means. I don't control markets. I can't, I'm capable of making mistakes too. We just dig in and we do our best to fix them. And, then we come out okay. And I think investors would fault you for being corrupt, for sure, for being maybe make, not necessarily making mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes, but for being absent. If you're not willing, if you just throw your hands up, oh, this deal's not working, I'm out of here. That's that would bother me if I was invested with someone. But if someone's digging in and they're giving it their best shot and they're really working hard, then I think, mistakes are mistakes. I mean, they're going to be made. Markets aren't perfect. Things are going to move around. So probably a little more information than you need right there.
No, that was gold. That was great. So let's go back. So you were selling houses to begin with,
Mhm.
and now you're at where you are. How has real estate changed your life?
Well, that's a great question. I think it's been a really big evolutionary process for me, really. I mean, there's at every step, there's something else that you're sort of getting your head around that you didn't really understand before. It's just like growth in anything. I don't know if it would have been any different in any other industry. I was never really employable. I just didn't really, I had mentors, but I needed my own kind of thing, which is why real estate worked well for me. I had very good mentors, business mentors, skills coaches, people I hired to train me how to learn specific things and do things, who I really kind of looked up to and admired. And so I'd work very hard, but it was on building my own thing. And so, not really being employable put me in real estate because it was kind of the only thing I could, start and do right from day one on my own, but underneath an umbrella, which is why I kind of liked it. Could have been insurance, could have been, who knows, selling Cutco knives. A lot of my friends did very, very well selling Cutco knives, and they're great knives. But anyway, so good, in fact, that my daughter sliced her finger.
Oh no.
She's all right. Anyway, so to answer your question, if I can remember it now, the way that it's changed me lately is different because I'm now in a position. I always sort of thought that I was shooting for this idea of do the work once, get paid forever, have enough passive income and investment income where you don't have to work, and then I can just goof off all day and do whatever. And it is true, it does free up a lot of time. And fortunately, because I have 4 kids now between ages 7 and 13, it gives me time to coach sports, times to attend games, do karate classes, stuff like that with my kids. And so that's been wonderful. It is somewhat difficult. Like the whole money thing is weird because I'm just in a different position. I never really had a lot of cash or a lot of liquidity around. We just recently sold a portion of our portfolio in one of our entities for $84 million. I'm the largest owner in that entity, and plus, we get fees when we sell stuff. So it was a big transaction. I mean, huge. If you asked me 5 years ago if I'd be doing a transaction that size, I probably said no way. It used to be hard to raise $1 million for a deal. Now, we don't really want to do anything that takes less than 10 to 20 in equity. So, the numbers have gotten bigger, but cerebrally, the process of getting my head around kind of where I am and what I'm really working for has been challenging, I'd say. But it sort of settles back where it started. I really like the idea of creating value for other people. I think if I can, help, we have a lot of physicians invested with us. They don't have a lot of time to focus on real estate investing or this or the type of investing. Other business owners, same thing. They have so much time in their own businesses, making their businesses successful. They really look to us. And so if I can create value for them, that gives me a really good sense of worth. And so I like working for that. And for my team, all my team members, they're getting there too. And so, as they grow and they evolve and they become more valuable, my goal is to own less and less of what I've got going on and have them own more and more and just sort of, evolve out of the business that I evolved into.
Yeah. Oh, that's really cool. So you mentioned you have a 5-year life plan. Where will you be in 5 years?
Well, it's it's funny. I have everything on that plan. Going way back to when I first started, and I had this idea that someday I wanted to get married and have kids and have a place up north. And there are a lot of goals on that plan that used to be a lot about financial hurdles. I didn't want to have personal debt. I wanted to own my own real estate free and clear, a certain amount of passive income. Really what I did on the financial side of it is I took the scorecard from the game Cash Flow. If you saw, Robert Kiyosaki wrote the books, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Cash Flow Quadrant, and he had this game Cash Flow. So I got that game and I played it once or twice, but really I took the scorecard from it because I thought it was really neat, and I created an Excel spreadsheet out of it. And the whole thing's designed so that you're building your passive and business income and your taxable income you don't really need anymore. And so, and he obviously called it getting out of the rat race. But, I built that into the plan. And so it used to be that plan had way more just financial focus. But as the pages have gone in there and the goals have changed a little bit because the financial hurdles have been met, I don't necessarily care if my net worth doubles again or 2 more times in my lifespan. Chasing dollars is not really where I want to be. So things have gotten replaced in there. Like, the goals in there now have more to do with, time I want to spend with my kids, availability I want to have, to kite surf with my friends. We've gotten into this kite surfing, which is a tremendous amount of fun. And, we spend 2 months up north every summer at our lake house. We pull the kids out of school every year for a month and travel and live somewhere else. So they're life experiences. It's going by so fast, and I know it's a cliche, but it's crazy. I'm 48, and I'm like, I just kind of feel like I got to make use of everything I have left, and I really, I want the business to do well also, but I want the team to take on more and more responsibility for it. And I'll still be involved, but it's changed quite substantially, I should say, especially in the last 3 years, really.
Yeah. No, that's great. So, John, if somebody's looking to reach out and get in touch with you, learn a little bit more about what you're doing, where can they find you?
Yeah, you could just send an email to ir@promanas.com. We can, I'm always happy to tell people, look, if you want to see the deals we put out, how we structure things, we add you to our potential investor list. Happy to do that, whether you invest or not, I don't really care. Or if you're just copying our materials or you want to see stuff, no problem. It's kind of a one-way push. We might send something out every 3 months or 2 to 3 months. If somebody's interested in talking to me personally, they're welcome to email me directly at, actually I get my email through my assistant, Rachel, Rachel, @promanas.com. And then she kind of screens and forward stuff because I'm trying to stay off of a lot of things, really. I will say these little iPhone things they came up with. There's a picture of the family.
Oh, nice.
But they're a complete distraction. And so if we're talking about people that want to learn what I do and how I do it and whatever, I will tell you, don't read the news, don't get on the social media, set your plan as to what you want to accomplish and set your goals and really block that stuff out. You got to put your blinders on today more than ever, more than ever. It's, I find myself scrolling through my news app, just reading headlines, occasionally maybe clicking on something. And then, after a couple of days, I realize I'm addicted to these stupid headlines and I'm experiencing anxiety about, who knows what, in what part of the world. And it's like, I can't do anything about these things. And I'm not saying be ignorant. I'm saying, focus on the things you can control, do the best you can do, and don't get distracted by other people selling you information and hype. I mean, weather reports are the best. Some people get into the weather thing. I've been hooked on the weather thing. It's like, oh, catastrophe, the weather, flooding and rain and global warming. And it's like, they're just selling you something. They're trying to grab eyeballs. Everything's a sale. And it's like, so you got to have a healthy skeptic, but that's how people can get me. Rachel at promanas.com, IR at promanas.com if you want to get on our investor list or whatever. And I'm happy to help out any way I can.
No, that's great. Well, John, just want to say thanks so much for sharing your success with us today. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate it, Seth. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. And to you, our reviewers, I wish you well on your journey from purchase to profits. See you next time.